A good woman's silence after pain is louder than any confrontation. It's not passive. It's not avoidance. It's a conscious choice made from a place of deep awareness. There's something profoundly powerful in that kind of silence. It doesn't seek validation. It doesn't ask for sympathy. It just exists. Raw, unfiltered, honest. We often misunderstand silence. We're conditioned to interpret it as weakness or surrender, as if only words hold weight. But there's a kind of silence that's not born of fear, but of strength. It's the silence that comes after giving everything, energy, love, patience, belief, and realizing none of it was truly held with care. When someone who has tried their best finally steps back, it's not because they have nothing to say. It's because saying more would only dishonor what they've already done. A good woman, when hurt, doesn't always yell or argue. She often withdraws, not to manipulate, but to protect. She detaches, not to punish, but to preserve what's left of her dignity. Because when she's reached the point where silence is her response, it's not a lack of love. It's a recognition that love alone cannot sustain a one-sided effort. People often don't notice the moment things start to shift. They see the result, the cold shoulder, the emotional distance, the sudden calm that feels unfamiliar. But they rarely see the slow unraveling that led there. The ignored messages, the repeated apologies without changed behavior, the emotional absence masked by excuses, the gradual erosion of trust. A good woman endures more than most people ever realize, not because she lacks boundaries, but because she sees the potential for growth in the people she loves. She gives second chances, and sometimes third, because she believes healing isn't linear and love can be messy. But even she has a threshold. And when that line is crossed, when her patience has been exhausted and her self-worth starts to whisper louder than her loyalty, her silence arrives. That silence isn't empty. It carries everything she ever wanted to say but realized would fall on deaf ears. It's filled with the weight of disappointment, the ache of broken promises, and the clarity that she cannot fix someone who isn't willing to meet her halfway. And so she steps back, not with resentment, but with resolve. This moment, while often misunderstood by the man who hurt her, is not about anger, it's about understanding. She's come to understand that staying would require her to abandon herself, and she's not willing to do that anymore. This is the moment when trust, once broken, begins to reshape her love into something new. Self-respect. Love at its purest is trust. It's not just about emotions. It's about security, honesty, and consistency. When a man breaks a good woman's trust, he's not just making a mistake. He's altering the lens through which she views the entire relationship. The space that was once sacred becomes unfamiliar. The words that once comfort her begin to feel hollow. And yet, she doesn't react with vengeance, she responds with distance. And that's where her strength lies. People think trust is rebuilt with apologies, but words once broken don't carry the same meaning. What rebuilds trust is action. Consistent, intentional, self-aware action. But by the time a good woman goes silent, she's usually already waited too long for that action to come. Here's what's important to understand. Love doesn't vanish when trust is broken. Not right away. Instead, it begins to shift. It detaches. It rewrites its own rules. Where there was once belief in another, there's now the beginning of belief in herself. Not because she stopped caring, but because she finally started caring enough to walk away. This shift is subtle, yet seismic. She doesn't become cold-hearted, she becomes clear-minded. She doesn't build walls, she sets standards. She doesn't close herself off, she becomes more intentional about who has access to her heart. And the man? He may not notice the change immediately. He may still believe that everything is salvageable with a little time, a few gestures, or the right words. But what he won't realize until much later is that what he broke wasn't just a moment of trust. He broke the foundation upon which she built her belief in us. And that's not easily reconstructed. In the absence of trust, love becomes heavy, it becomes laborious, the joy drains from it, the lightness disappears, and no matter how deep the connection once was, the fear of being hurt again becomes stronger than the desire to try again. So when a good woman becomes silent, and when that silence begins to feel heavier than any argument ever could, the relationship has already shifted. It's not in crisis, it's in transition. A transition from we to me, from hope to closure. And yet, she doesn't leave bitter. She leaves better. Not because she wanted to, but because she had to. Her silence is her new beginning. It's where she reclaims her voice, not to shout, but to speak inward, to listen to herself, to honor what she needs, what follows. This silence isn't resentment, it's growth, it's peace, it's a future where her energy isn't drained trying to convince someone of her worth, a future where love is mutual, not transactional, where trust is protected, not tested, and maybe, one day, the man who lost her will hear that silence in moments of reflection, in the gaps between conversations, in the laughter that's no longer there, and he will remember not what she said, but what she stopped saying, not how she left, but why she had to. That's the quiet truth. When a man hurts a good woman, what follows isn't just silence, it's her evolution. Pain is a strange teacher. Most people think it breaks you, but the truth is, it shapes you. When a good woman is hurt, what emerges afterward is rarely what people expect. They assume she'll collapse, that she'll stay stuck in grief, holding on to what once was. But that's not what really happens. Her pain doesn't make her weaker. It sharpens her instincts. It deepens her wisdom. It redirects her vision. The woman who once led with her heart begins to balance that heart with discernment. The same love she once gave freely becomes a gift she offers with intention. Pain doesn't harden her, it hones her. It strips away illusions, false hopes, and the habit of giving too much without receiving enough. It pulls her out of the clouds of fantasy and into the grounded truth of who she is and what she deserves. She begins to see differently. She starts to notice the patterns she once ignored, the subtle lies, the inconsistency, the small moments where effort could have been made but wasn't. And these realizations don't bring rage, they bring clarity. That's the wisdom pain delivers, not through loud moments of anger, but through quiet moments of understanding. People often assume that heartbreak will leave a woman broken, but the ones who grow through it don't just recover, they evolve. They become more aligned with their values, more protective of their time, more intentional about their love. The very pain that tried to undo them becomes the fire that rebuilds them, not into someone new, but into someone more whole. There's something deeply empowering about knowing you walked through betrayal or abandonment and didn't lose yourself, that you felt the weight of rejection or disrespect and still chose healing over hate. This journey inward, this return to self, doesn't happen overnight. But each step she takes away from the source of her pain is also a step closer to the truth of her own strength. And perhaps the most powerful thing she realizes is this: her worth was never dependent on how she was treated. It took the wound to expose the wound's origin. That maybe, for too long, she accepted less, not because she lacked value, but because she forgot how to enforce it. Pain became the turning point. It brought her home to herself. That's the kind of growth you can't fake. It's earned, it's lived. And once she's lived it, she doesn't go back. Not because she can't forgive, but because she's changed. She no longer fits into the spaces she once tried to squeeze herself into. The version of her that tolerated disrespect no longer exists. And that's a quiet, powerful kind of freedom. What's even more surprising is that in the face of that transformation, she doesn't seek revenge. That's the assumption many make, that a hurt woman will retaliate, but the ones who are truly strong don't look backward. They don't waste energy proving anything to the one who hurt them. Their focus turns forward, not on payback, but on peace. And peace, for her, becomes more valuable than closure. She no longer needs long conversations or deep apologies to understand what went wrong. She sees that the very absence of effort or empathy was all the closure she ever needed. She doesn't chase clarity from the person who broke her. She finds it within herself. That's what makes her evolution so profound. It's not dramatic, it's deliberate. She doesn't slam doors, she simply stops opening them. She doesn't argue, she simply stops explaining herself to people committed to misunderstanding her. And that, more than any shouted farewell, is what echoes loudest. She rebuilds quietly. She returns to the things that fill her soul. She focuses on her passions, her purpose, her peace, and as she rises, she begins to attract different energy. People who see her not as someone to fix, but as someone to grow with. People who value what she brings not just in presence, but in principle. This doesn't mean she forgets what happened. Growth doesn't erase the past, it reframes it. She looks back, not with bitterness, but with insight. She no longer sees herself as the victim of someone's immaturity or selfishness. She sees herself as someone who chose to love, who dared to hope, and who learned the hardest lesson of all, how to let go. And in letting go, she finds herself again, more grounded, more aware, more aligned. Her love doesn't shrink, it becomes more refined. She still gives, still believes in goodness, still shows up with compassion, but now she knows how to guard her energy, how to recognize red flags early, how to stop watering gardens that were never hers to tend. This is where her true power lies, not in how much she endured, but in what she did with it. She used her pain as a mirror, not a wall. She looked inward, not outward. She chose healing over hatred, wisdom over woundedness, peace over punishment. And while the man who hurt her may go on with life unaware of her quiet transformation, there will come a time when he notices the difference, not in her presence, but in her absence. He will notice the way no one else quite listens like she did. No one else shows up like she did. No one else believes in him the way she once did. By then, she will be long gone, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Not because she gave up, but because she chose herself. And that, more than anything else, is what follows when a man hurts a good woman. Her pain becomes her compass. Her silence becomes her boundary. Her growth becomes her legacy. There is something deeply revealing about what happens when someone who was once soft, giving, and open begins to change, not because they wanted to, but because their experiences forced them to. When a good woman is hurt, the shift is not always visible from the outside right away. It begins internally, quietly, as if the soul itself is doing a quiet audit of what it allowed, what it tolerated, and what must never happen again. What changes first is her lens. She begins to look at relationships not through the filter of romantic hope, but through the clarity of experience. Where she once gave the benefit of the doubt, she now looks for patterns. Where she once excused behavior out of empathy, she now sets standards out of necessity. The world doesn't get a colder version of her, gets a clearer one. Not bitter, not harsh, just more honest. This is what people misunderstand about transformation. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it doesn't announce itself. It arrives gradually, each insight stacked on the last, until one day she realizes she's no longer willing to betray herself just to keep someone else comfortable. She starts recognizing the red flags she once ignored, the small moments that used to sting but were brushed aside now become undeniable. The sarcastic jokes at her expense, the promises that always needed reminders, the way her boundaries were negotiated like they were optional. These moments no longer confuse her, they reveal. Her intuition sharpens. She starts to notice the difference between effort and performance, between temporary change and genuine growth, between someone who listens and someone who only waits for their turn to speak. Her standards aren't just higher, they're grounded in self-awareness. She knows who she is now. That knowing becomes her filter, and with that clarity, her energy changes. She no longer pours herself into relationships hoping to be chosen. She knows she is the prize, not in an arrogant way, but in a deeply rooted, self-honoring way. That energy doesn't chase, it attracts. It doesn't beg, it decides. But here's what's even more important. She doesn't carry this transformation forward with resentment. She doesn't see all men as the same, nor does she shut herself off from love. She simply no longer accepts a love that costs her peace. Her heart remains open, but her doors now have locks. Not to keep people out, but to ensure only those with the right intention are allowed in. And this new version of her doesn't seek validation through someone else's approval. She validates herself. She becomes her own reference point for what is enough. That shift changes everything, because when a woman no longer needs to be chosen to feel whole, she becomes unstoppable. What's powerful is that her change doesn't scream never again with anger. It whispers it with resolve. It's in the boundaries she upholds without guilt, in the invitations she declines without over-explaining, in the decisions she makes from alignment, not fear. She becomes more deliberate in her actions and more discerning with her time. Her life becomes a space for reciprocity, not rescue. The people around her notice the change, often without being able to describe it. They feel it in her presence. She's less available to drama, less reactive to guilt, less moved by manipulation. She has stopped negotiating her worth, and that confuses those who were once used to her overgiving. Some may say she's changed, and they'd be right. But what they often mean is that she's no longer convenient. No longer the version of her who tolerated emotional labor without reciprocity. No longer the one who stayed silent to keep the peace. Her peace now includes speaking up, walking away, or choosing herself without apology. This version of her doesn't settle, not because she's demanding, but because she finally understands that love is not about endurance. It's about mutual respect, growth, and effort. She's no longer impressed by grand gestures that lack consistency. She pays attention to the everyday choices, how she's spoken to when no one's watching, how her needs are treated when they're not easy, how her no is honored when it's not convenient. And it's not that she becomes hard to love, she becomes impossible to deceive. She can sense inauthenticity in ways she couldn't before, because she's lived through what it feels like to be deeply hurt by someone who once claimed to care. That memory doesn't haunt her. It teaches her. It becomes her internal compass. What's most inspiring about her journey is not just that she grew through pain, it's that she didn't let the pain define her. She used it as a mirror, not a mask. She didn't bury her sensitivity. She refined it. She didn't suppress her capacity for love. She redirected it, starting with herself. That self-love becomes her anchor. It's the reason she doesn't fall for words without action anymore. It's the reason she walks away the first time someone disrespects her. It's the reason she no longer sees solitude as loneliness, but as restoration. She understands now that the relationship she has with herself sets the tone for every other connection in her life. And when people see her strength, they assume she's always been this way, but only she knows the nights she spent rebuilding her spirit, the moments she questioned her worth, the times she had to choose herself even when it hurt. That quiet work is what makes her glow now. The man who once hurt her may look back, confused at how she changed so much. He may still think of her as the one who would always be there, always forgive, always come back. But he doesn't realize that he didn't just lose her love. He lost access to a version of her that no longer exists. And she won't return to that version, not even for him, because that version was built on hoping someone would choose her. This one is built on choosing herself.